My boyfriend said his dad would never accept me because I was too different. But the real reason was so much worse. He told me his dad would never accept me, said I was too different. Not in a cruel way, not in a loud, slamming doors, shouting across the dinner table kind of way. It was subtle, soft, like he was protecting me. "It's not you," Landon said. "It's generational, he's just old school." He said his dad wouldn't understand someone like me. Different background, different culture, different skin. Different enough that Landon made it sound like loving me was something he did in spite of my difference. I didn't push. I told myself I got it. Because that's what we do when we want to believe someone's intentions are pure, we wrap them in context. I convinced myself it wasn't about me, but deep down it started to stick. Not all at once, but slowly in the in-between moments. When he introduced me to friends but never took photos. When he dodged questions about meeting his family with a shrug and a tired smile. When he said, "I just want to keep things simple." That line landed harder than he meant it to, because I knew what he meant. I was the complication. He never said it outright, but silence has a tone. I'm 29, he's 34. We'd been together almost a year. And I started to believe, truly believe, that maybe I was just lucky to be with someone like him. Someone from that kind of family, old money, perfectly pressed holidays. Dinner tables where people said things like legacy and pedigree without irony. I'd never been part of that world, and maybe I never would be. He made it sound like he was shielding me, like being kept on the outside was some kind of mercy. So I never asked to be let in until I was, by accident. And everything I believed about who he was, who I was to him, collapsed in a single word. My old name. I met his father by accident. It was a charity fundraiser, art auction, rooftop cocktails, people with last names that opened doors. I wasn't even supposed to be there. But a mutual friend extended a last-minute +1, and I didn't think twice. I dressed safe, understated, neutral, something Landon once described as elegant without making a statement. I didn't even know Alan was there. Not until I turned around with a glass of Prosecco and found him standing 5 feet away. Tall, gray suit, smile already fading, I stepped forward, offered my hand. "Hi, I'm." He blinked. His eyes scanned my face like a scanner loading a file. And then, softly, like a ghost crawling out of his throat, he said it, my old name, the one I haven't used in years. The one I buried when I left that life behind. The one Landon swore he never knew. I froze, smile still fixed, hand still extended, but inside every piece of me locked up like a vault slamming shut. Alan didn't say anything else. He just stared, and I stared back, trying to keep my face still, trying not to let the blood draining from mine show as clearly as it had from his. I made some excuse, something about the bathroom. Then I walked away on legs that barely held. Because in that moment, I realized something awful. This wasn't just a case of his father doesn't like me. His father knew me. From a life Landon pretended never existed, and the man I loved had lied. Alan knew me from my early 20s. Back when I worked the floor at the Wycombe, a high-end, members-only club in the city. Not that kind of club, nothing scandalous, just luxury. Polished marble bars, caviar bites. Private cigar room. I was 23, needed cash. Hustled shifts like currency. I served drinks, took coats, memorized regulars' names and allergies and signature drinks. Alan was one of them, always polite. Always tipping just enough to feel generous without being generous. He never crossed a line, never made me uncomfortable. But he was there, every week. We'd exchanged nods, small talk, the occasional joke. He was just another rich man whose world I orbited, quietly and professionally, for 3 years. And I never connected the dots. Because Landon never gave me any dots to connect. He never told me his dad had been a member. Never told me he'd been there too. Because in our relationship, in the version of me he let exist, that girl behind the bar in black slacks and red lipstick never existed. She was a before, not someone you fall in love with. Not someone you bring home, but Alan remembered. 5 years later, one glance and he remembered. And Landon never once told me they'd ever met. Because in his story, I wasn't history, I was something to hide. I waited until we were home. Landon was in the kitchen, making tea like nothing had shifted. Like his entire foundation hadn't just cracked open in the middle of a rooftop. I asked quietly, "How did your father know my old name?" He paused, stirred sugar into his mug. Too slow, too careful. Then he said, "We've never talked about that. I didn't know he knew you." But his voice cracked when he said it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. The kind of crack that doesn't come from surprise, but from getting caught. It wasn't the words. It was how he said them. Like someone choosing a line from a list of rehearsed answers. And that was the first honest thing I'd seen in days. Not the lie, the fear behind it, because he knew the moment had arrived. The one where I stopped being the version he curated and started being the one he couldn't control. I started digging, not out of vengeance, out of necessity, because if he could lie about something as fundamental as knowing who I was before him, what else was built on omission? I texted Marissa, who used to bartend with me back then, asked if she remembered any events where Alan brought his son. She called me, immediately. "Of course," she said. "That private birthday thing, remember? Alan showed up with some smug guy in a blazer, tipped like a priest." I asked for the year. She said, "Had to be 6 years ago." I did the math. 1 year before I ever met Landon. Then I messaged Tina, former PR lead for the club, now doing brand strategy for a tech CEO. She dug up a guest list from her archives. Alan Dempsey. +1, Landon Dempsey. That was the night. They'd both been there, they'd both seen me. I had smiled at them, thanked them, probably handed them monogrammed menus and refilled Alan's scotch. And they had seen me. Back when I was someone Landon would never date. Back when I was someone he could pretend not to recognize. But now, he was in love with the same woman he once looked through. And that truth was something he couldn't reconcile. So he didn't. He just lied. I finally understood what he meant by too different. It wasn't my background, or my skin, or my last name, it was my beginning. The version of me he met first. The one behind the bar. Wearing flats that pinched and lipstick that smudged. Pouring drinks for men like his father. It wasn't that Landon didn't remember. It's that he did. And somewhere deep down, he decided I wasn't someone to bring home. Not until I cleaned up. Not until I became someone he could reshape into acceptable. His shame wasn't about me. It was about being seen with someone he once looked down on. But he didn't have the courage to say that. Didn't have the words to own the disgust he'd inherited. So he dressed it up as protection. Said his father wouldn't accept me. Let the weight fall on the older man. When the truth was, he was the one who couldn't accept me. Not all of me. Not the parts that didn't fit into the image he built. So he built a relationship on editing. And thought I wouldn't notice the gaps. I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Didn't write a dramatic post or pack a bag in a flurry of tears. I just planned. His birthday was coming up, a big dinner planned at his favorite restaurant. Private room, mahogany walls, preset menus with calligraphy. All the people who mattered to him would be there. His colleagues, his mother, his father, I asked sweetly. "Would it be okay if I brought a gift for your dad?" Landon smiled genuinely. "That would mean a lot." And I smiled back, because it would. Just not in the way he thought. See, I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about untying the knot he'd twisted my history into. He wanted a relationship that started from the middle, where nothing before him mattered, where nothing complicated could survive the light. But I'm not a before and after. I'm a whole story, and I was done being edited. Dinner was elegant. Quiet jazz, dim lighting, polished glasses that caught the glow just right. Everyone wore something pressed. The air smelled like steak and old money. Landon was glowing, hand on my back, smiling like the cracks hadn't spread underneath his feet. Alan was across from us, sipping a deep red wine, eyes scanning the table like it was a business proposal. When dessert came, I stood up, reached into my bag, pulled out a silver-wrapped box. Landon gave me a little nod. Alan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I handed it across the table. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a black and white photo. Me 5 years younger, smiling behind the bar at the Wycombe. A martini in my hand, red lipstick. Same eyes. Tucked beside it, a printed guest list from that night. Alan Dempsey, member, +1, Landon Dempsey. Landon's name circled in red. Alan stared at it, then at me, then at his son. His voice didn't rise. He simply said, "You lied to both of us." Then he stood up, left his napkin on the plate, and walked out. No scene, no apology, just the sound of truth rearranging the room. Landon didn't speak to me for 2 days, not a word. No texts, no calls, not even one of his short, passive-aggressive voice notes, just silence. Then came the email, long, paragraphs. Centered subject line like he was submitting an essay about the other night. He said he was ashamed. Said he panicked. Said he thought if I knew how he used to see me, I'd walk away. Said he wasn't that man anymore. That the version of me from the club didn't deserve to be erased. But that he didn't know how to carry both truths at once. And that he wanted to start over. Wanted a clean slate. Fresh beginning, like memory was a whiteboard and not a permanent scar. I read it twice. Then closed the tab because shame might be honest. But it's not a blueprint, and regret is not a refund. He wanted forgiveness without story. But I'm a whole woman, and he only ever loved me in pieces. June called me, his mother. Landon must have told her everything or just enough to make me the villain. She started polite. Said she was disappointed. Then the real message came, "You embarrassed the family." Her tone was cold, firm, the kind of elegance that cuts without raising its voice. She said I weaponized my past. Said I ruined what could have been a peaceful evening. I let her speak. Let her circle the wagons of pride and performance. Then I said, "Your son erased me. I just reminded him I exist." Silence, a long one. Then I hung up, not out of spite, out of completion. Because that was the last time I'd explain my worth to a room full of people who only knew how to value appearances. I moved out last week. No dramatic exit. No flung boxes or crying in doorways. Just silence. I waited until he was at work. Packed the essentials, my books, my blender, my story. Left no note, no forwarding address. But I did leave something behind. Inside his closet, taped to the door. Just beneath the tailored suits and pressed linen shirts he wore to impress the world. A photo. That photo, me behind the bar, smiling in red lipstick, and the guest list. His name still circled. The truth staring him in the face every morning. Right beside the clothes he wore to play a better man. Because now he'd have to get dressed beside the version of me he pretended not to know. And I took nothing sentimental, only my voice. And the one thing he never gave me, the full, unapologetic weight of myself. I'm not ashamed of where I started, only of how long I let someone pretend they didn't know. How long I let someone love me with conditions, with edits, with fear in place of pride, but not anymore. The next person I love, they'll know everything. The club, the shifts. The nights I went home with sore feet and a spine made of steel. They'll know the girl who smiled for tips, and the woman who stood up at a birthday dinner and handed back her silence. And they'll be proud to say, "She built herself." That's the real gift, not the photo, not the proof, not the wound, the knowing, the owning, the never shrinking again. That's what Alan never had the guts to give his son, and what Landon never had the strength to give me. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.